The cavern smelled of burnt stone and old ash, the kind of air that made lungs ache as though each breath carried a shard of glass. Torches sputtered along the jagged walls, feeding a pale, hungry glow into the shadows that refused to move. At the center of it all, bound by runes older than kingdoms, was the altar. And on that altar sat the woman no mortal should ever have looked upon, the demon goddess herself. Her skin shimmered like onyx kissed by firelight, flawless and terrible. Eyes the color of liquid crimson bored into the chamber, and a smile played across lips that seemed to promise both bliss and ruin. Her horns curved like crescents, polished obsidian crowned with faint sigils that pulsed with unholy rhythm. Her very presence pressed on the heart, whispering in every beat, "Kneel, worship, surrender." Yet the man standing before her did not kneel. He was no warrior, at least not by the look of him. His boots were cracked, his cloak ragged, his face streaked with days of dirt and blood. But his eyes were steady, fixed not on the impossible beauty before him, but on the chains of light that wrapped her wrists, holding her to the altar. "So," she purred, voice smooth as honey dragged across a blade. "Another fool comes to beg. Another mortal who dares whisper desires into my ear, thinking he can twist eternity to serve his pitiful needs." The man didn't flinch. His hands rested at his sides, fists faintly trembling, not with fear, but with restraint. "You are bound to the pact," he said. His voice was rough, as if carved out of stone. "3 wishes, no more, and once spoken you must grant them." Her laughter filled the cavern like the roll of thunder before a storm. "Oh, how bold! How deliciously naive! You speak the pact as though you hold its weight. You think my chains make me powerless. Little mortal, you should fear the price of a wish more than the teeth of wolves." But he did not answer her warning. Instead, he stepped closer to the altar, his boots crunching on the broken floor. He stopped only a breath away from her, so close he could see the faint rise and fall of her chest, the shimmering heat that seemed to ripple from her skin. And in that nearness, he spoke the words that silenced even her laughter. "My first wish," he said slowly, each word deliberate, "is that you tell me your true name." For the first time in an age too long to measure, the demon goddess trembled. The chains shivered against her wrists, as though her very being recoiled. Her crimson eyes widened, the eternal calm inside them cracking like ice over fire. She tried to speak, but the words stuck like poison in her throat. The pact burned in the air between them, ancient law digging claws into her essence. "You!" she hissed, voice lower now, venom replacing honey. "You dare ask this? Do you have any notion of what you've done?" The man's jaw tightened. "I know enough. A name is power. Your name is the one secret you guard even from gods, and now, bound by the pact, you must speak it." Her breath came faster, each inhale shuddering like the earth itself fighting collapse. The torches around them flared, bending toward her as if the fire sought her fear. She leaned forward, her chains straining, her body taut as though every muscle fought the compulsion clawing at her throat. "No mortal, no creature of dust and bone, has ever dared this." Her words were a growl now, animalistic, primal. "Do you wish to unmake yourself, to bind your soul to knowledge it cannot endure? Names are not mere words. My name is ruin. My name is the end of suns." "Say it," he demanded, and his voice broke like steel on stone. The pact surged between them. The chains glowed brighter, forcing her, bending her will beneath its merciless decree. And then, after a silence that stretched into eternity, she whispered. The sound was not a word, not entirely. It was the cry of mountains breaking, the hush of stars dying, the first scream of a newborn. It cut into the marrow of the world itself, a vibration that made stone weep and shadow crawl. Her true name spilled into the air, and the cavern itself seemed to bow beneath its weight. The man staggered, clutching his chest, blood running from his nose, his ears ringing as though 1,000 bells had shattered inside his skull. But his eyes never left her, even as his body nearly collapsed under the burden of her truth. He had demanded it, and now he bore it. She watched him, trembling still, fury and something else, something dangerously close to fear, shining in her crimson gaze. You impossible fool. No human should stand after hearing that. You should be ash. You should be broken. But he straightened, wiping the blood from his lips with the back of his hand. His chest rose, ragged but unyielding. "Now I know you," he said softly. "And knowing is the first step to breaking chains, even yours." For the first time, the demon goddess did not know whether to laugh or to scream. The cavern seemed smaller after her true name was spoken, as if the walls themselves had recoiled in fear. The torches no longer burned steady, their flames bent inward, drawn toward her trembling form, flickering like frightened animals sensing a predator. She sat rigid against the altar, her chains slack but alive, glowing with the faint heat of the pact. For the first time in centuries, the demon goddess looked less like an untouchable storm and more like something cornered. Her crimson eyes were wide, their eternal fire faltering. "You should not be standing," she whispered, as though the sound itself cost her strength. "Mortals cannot survive my truth. Do you not feel it clawing at you? The weight in your bones, the tearing in your soul?" The man's knees nearly buckled under that truth. His hands shook as though the marrow itself rattled inside him. His veins burned, his chest felt hollow, and his ears still rang with echoes of the name he had forced her to speak. Every heartbeat was a hammer on cracked glass. Blood ran hot down his upper lip, dripping onto the stone floor in slow, red trails. But he refused to look away. He refused to collapse. "I feel it," he rasped, voice hoarse but steady. "And still, I'm here." Her lips parted, disbelief etched into her flawless face. She leaned forward, straining against her chains as if proximity could explain him. "Why? Why endure agony for this? What are you trying to prove?" He swallowed against the iron taste of blood in his throat. His eyes, tired, raw, but unflinching, met hers. "That you're not untouchable." Her laughter came sharp, but it quivered at the edges. "Not untouchable? I am ruin itself. I am the end that waits in every shadow. You think surviving a word makes you my equal?" "No," he said softly. "It makes me someone who won't run." The weight of that answer clung to her like frost. For an immortal who had watched armies crumble before her gaze, who had seen kings slit their own throats to avoid her wrath, the notion that a mortal, broken, bleeding, fragile, could simply stay shook something she had thought long dead within her. She drew in a breath, steadying herself. "You still have 2 wishes left. Choose wisely, little mortal, or your life will vanish before you taste its price." He staggered a step closer, each movement heavy, as if chains of his own dragged behind him. His voice cracked as he spoke, not from weakness, but from the enormity of what he was about to demand. "My second wish." He paused, forcing the words through the pain. "My second wish is that you remember what it feels like to be human." The pact roared to life. The chains erupted in blinding radiance, a shriek of ancient law splitting the cavern like a scream of the earth itself. She cried out, the sound sharp and raw, nothing like her calculated laughter. This was pain, primal and unwilling. Her body convulsed, shoulders snapping back, wings of shadow tearing out of her spine before collapsing into smoke. Her hands clawed at her chest as though the memory he forced into her would rip her apart from within. Flashes of something alien to her eternity surged through her mind, cold air burning fragile lungs, hunger twisting inside a stomach that could no longer feed on fire, exhaustion creeping into bones that now felt heavy with time. Emotions, uncontrollable, messy, vivid, stormed into her heart. Fear, loneliness, desire, love, loss. Each feeling struck like a dagger. Each memory of what it was to need left her trembling. She gasped as the pact released her, collapsing forward against the altar. Her chest heaved, her claws scraped stone, leaving trails of dust. Her crimson eyes shimmered with something unfamiliar, wetness gathering at their edges, threatening to fall. The man watched, barely standing himself, his body swaying. His heart ached at the sight of her suffering, but he didn't take it back. He couldn't. This was necessary. Her voice broke as she spat the words, trembling with more than fury. You've cursed me. Do you know what you've done? I feel everything again. Every ache. Every weakness. Every hollow in my chest that I buried centuries ago. You have dragged me back into chains more cruel than these. She shook her bound wrists, the runes flickering in response. Why? Why would you make me this? He closed his eyes for a moment, steadying the storm in his chest. Then, when he opened them, his voice was softer, almost mournful. Because gods can't understand, monsters can't understand, but humans, we do. And if you're ever going to see the world differently, you need to feel it again, the pain, the joy, all of it. Otherwise, nothing I say will ever reach you. She turned her face away, but not before he saw it. The trembling of her lips, the quiver of her chin, the tears that clung stubbornly to her lashes but refused to fall. She hated him for seeing it, hated him more for causing it, and hated herself most of all for not being able to stop it. You're crueler than any demon I've known, she whispered, her voice raw. At least they simply kill. You peel me open. He forced himself to take another step, swaying, his hand pressed against the wall for balance. I don't want to hurt you, but I need you to feel so that when I make my last wish, it means something. Her eyes snapped back to him, burning with fury and confusion, but underneath, something else. Fear. Fear not of death or pain, but of him. Of what he intended. And what is this final wish, mortal? What cruel dagger will you drive next into my heart? His chest rose and fell with the weight of his breath. His body screamed at him to collapse, but his voice was steady when he said it. My last wish is to set you free. The words struck her like thunder. For a heartbeat, her breath caught, her body rigid as if time itself had stopped. Free. Not bound, not chained, not a goddess enslaved to the pact, but something terrifyingly unfamiliar. Herself, with choice. Her lips parted, but no words came. Her crimson eyes, now soft with something painfully human, stared at him in silence. For the first time in centuries, the demon goddess could not laugh, could not rage, could not pretend. She could only tremble. Her silence lingered longer than the echoes of his words. The cavern held its breath. Even the flames seemed uncertain, wavering between light and shadow, as though they too waited for her response. Free? She finally whispered, the word tasting strange on her tongue. Her crimson eyes fixed on him, searching, clawing for deception. Do you even know what you're saying, mortal? Do you understand what freedom means for me? He leaned against the altar, his hand pressed to his side where pain had begun to throb deep and merciless. The weight of her name still churned in his veins. The pull of humanity he had forced upon her still clung to the air like ash. His voice was hoarse, raw, but steady. I know exactly what it means. It means no chains, no pact, no bindings, no altar. You choose what you do, who you are. No one owns you. Not the gods, not the mortals, not even me." Her laugh was sharp, almost hysterical, a jagged edge to mask the tremor in her chest. "You're mad. Do you know what I would do, unchained? The skies would bleed, oceans would boil, kingdoms would crumble into dust. I would drown the world in my hunger, because that is what I am." He shook his head, slowly but with conviction. "That's what you were, before you remembered what it was like to feel." The words cut deeper than the pact's chains ever had. She wanted to deny him, to laugh in his face, to remind him she was the unholy ruin whose name made stone weep. But her chest still ached from the human heartbeat he had forced into her. Her throat still burned from the memory of breath, fragile and precious. And for the first time in ages, she felt something she had thought annihilated long ago: doubt. Her claws dug into the altar, scraping harshly against stone. "Why? Why would you give me that? Every fool who has stood where you stand has wished for power, for wealth, for immortality, and you—" Her voice broke, anger and confusion twisting together. "You waste your last wish on me?" He almost smiled, though the blood on his lips turned it bitter. "It's not a waste. I came here because I was tired of chains. Mine, yours, everyone's. We keep binding ourselves, pretending we're powerless. But if I can break your chains, maybe others can be broken too." She stared at him, unable to comprehend the audacity. It wasn't greed that had brought him here. It wasn't even desperation. It was something she had never seen in any mortal who had come before. Compassion, raw and terrifying in its strength. Her chest rose sharply, a breath stolen from somewhere deep, as though her body fought against the emotions surging inside. "Do you know what it will cost you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Do you know what the pact demands for such a wish? To undo my binding will drain you, burn through your soul until there is nothing left. You will die, mortal. Not slowly, not gently. You will unravel piece by piece, until even your memory fades." "I know." His answer came without hesitation, though his voice cracked with the weight of it. "But if I walk away now, you stay in chains, and I didn't come this far to watch another prison stand." Her lips trembled, her claws shaking as they curled into fists. For centuries, she had been a goddess of terror, untouched by sorrow, untouchable by love. Yet now, as she looked at the frail, bleeding man before her, she felt something worse than fear burning in her chest. A pain sharper than any blade. A grief she hadn't known she was still capable of. "No," she said suddenly, almost desperately. "Don't do this. You don't understand what I am. You free me, and you won't just unchain me. You'll release everything that I am into the world. And when it burns, when it drowns, when it falls into darkness, their blood will be on your hands." He shook his head, his eyes unwavering. "No. When you're free, the choices will be yours. Not mine. Not the gods. Yours. If the world burns, it'll be because you chose to burn it, not because you were bound to destruction." Tears finally spilled from her eyes, hot, furious, unwanted tears that streaked her flawless skin. She hated him for making her cry, hated herself more for not being able to stop. The sound of her chains rattled as she pulled at them, not in rage this time, but in desperation. "You are the cruelest man I have ever known," she whispered, her voice breaking, "because you make me want to believe you, and I don't know if I can." He reached up, his trembling hand brushing the edge of the altar. He didn't touch her, he didn't dare, but the nearness of it carried weight. "You don't have to believe me. You just have to choose when the time comes." Her breath hitched, ragged and uneven, each inhale a battle. She had been worshipped, feared, cursed, prayed to, bound and hated. But never, never in all her existence, had someone given her this: the possibility of choice. The cavern thrummed with the pact, the ancient chains glowing brighter, sensing his intent. They pulsed, as though eager for his final command, eager to twist the last wish into reality. She could feel it, too, the inevitability, the way the air thickened, heavy with law older than stars, the way his soul flickered, already fraying at the edges, preparing to ignite like dry parchment. Her crimson gaze locked onto his, desperate now. "Don't," she pleaded, the word foreign and bitter on her tongue. "Don't say it. Don't give me this. I don't want your sacrifice." He smiled faintly through the blood, a sad, weary smile. "It's not mine anymore. It's yours." And as the words left him, the cavern erupted in light. The cavern split with light, blinding and absolute. It poured from the chains, from the runes etched into the altar, from the very cracks in the stone, as if the world itself was tearing apart to honor his final wish. The demon goddess screamed, not in rage, not in defiance, but in terror. Her body arched against the altar, her chains glowing white-hot, smoke curling from her wrists where the bindings burned against her flesh. She could feel the pact tearing at her essence, stripping away the bonds that had held her for centuries, unraveling the cage that had defined her existence. "No!" she cried, her voice raw, unrecognizable from its usual silken venom. "Stop this! I don't want it like this!" The man staggered back, his body shaking violently. His veins glowed faintly, threads of light crawling up his arms, searing into his chest, branding his flesh as the pact demanded its price. His soul was the fuel. His life was the offering. He could feel himself dissolving, his thoughts blurring at the edges, his breath catching as if the air itself was slipping from him. But through it all, he watched her. The goddess, once untouchable and cruel, now writhed beneath the weight of freedom. Her eyes, crimson flames softened by something unbearably human, locked onto his. She saw him fading, burning himself away to unmake her chains, and something broke inside her. "Why?" she cried again. But the word wasn't sharp anymore. It was desperate, trembling. "Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me. I am your end, your ruin, your death." He coughed, blood flecking his lips. His voice was faint yet steady as it drifted through the storm of light. "Because no one deserves chains, not even you." Her breath caught like a sob. The altar shattered beneath her as the runes imploded, shards of stone bursting into the air. The chains screamed one last time before fracturing into dust, the sound echoing like the end of an age. She fell forward, no longer bound, her body trembling as she caught herself on hands that bled where the manacles had burned her. For the first time in centuries, she was unchained. But the man was collapsing. His skin glowed with fractures of light, cracks in the vessel of his body as the pact consumed what was left of him. He sank to his knees, his eyes dimming, his breath rattling shallow and uneven. "No!" She stumbled toward him, her hands trembling as they reached for his shoulders. When her claws touched him, she felt his warmth slipping away, his heartbeat faltering. Panic surged through her chest, real panic, sharp and suffocating. "Don't you dare die, mortal! Don't you dare leave me with this!" He tried to smile, weak and broken. "Isn't that what freedom is? Being left with choice?" Tears spilled freely from her eyes now, hot and bitter, running down her cheeks like rivers of fire. She shook him, furious at his fading strength. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't want this gift. You think you've saved me? You've cursed me with you." He exhaled, barely more than a whisper, but she leaned close and caught the words. "Then, don't waste it." Her claws curled into his cloak, clutching him like he was the only anchor in a world suddenly too vast, too terrifying. She had spent millennia in chains, her choices stolen, her path written. Now, As his light bled out into the cavern, she felt the crushing weight of freedom pressing onto her shoulders. She had never known fear like this, and she realized in that moment she didn't want him to go. The cavern dimmed as the light of the pact began to fade. His body slumped against her, his skin cold, his glow fading. He was almost gone. "No," her voice cracked, torn between rage and grief. "No! You don't get to give me this and then vanish. You don't get to break me open and leave me hollow. I won't let you." Something surged in her chest then, not power, not rage, but something she had not felt since the memory of mortality was forced back into her. Love. Raw, unformed, terrifying love. And with it came something else. Something she thought she had lost forever. Choice. Her hands shook as she cradled his fading form. For the first time in her eternal existence, she begged, not to the pact, not to the gods, but to herself. "Take me instead," she whispered, trembling. "If there is any balance, any justice left in this wretched universe, take me, not him." But no divine law answered. No chains returned. The pact was complete. He had spoken the wish, and its price was his. She pressed her forehead to his, her tears mixing with his blood. "Then I'll choose for both of us," she whispered, a vow carved from her very soul. "If you give me freedom, I'll use it to keep you here. I'll tear eternity apart before I let you slip away." Her crimson eyes blazed, not with ruin, but with desperate will. She reached deep into herself, into the endless abyss of her power, and for the first time, she bent it not to destruction, but to preservation. Shadows poured from her, wrapping around him, sinking into his broken form like threads of night-stitching torn fabric. The cavern shook, stones crumbling from the ceiling as her essence fought against the pact, against the law that demanded his death. She screamed with the effort, pouring her very being into him, binding her life to his in a way no goddess, no demon, no mortal had ever dared. And as the last crack of light in his body began to fade, his eyes fluttered open, dim, weak, but alive. He saw her above him, her face streaked with tears, her hands trembling against his chest. And for the first time since he had walked into the cavern, she looked utterly human. "You're still here," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Her lips trembled as she leaned closer. "Because you chained me, mortal, not with the pact, not with force, but with choice. And now, I choose you." The cavern collapsed around them, stone and shadow falling into ruin, but neither moved. In the heart of the destruction, goddess and mortal clung to one another, both trembling, both broken, both, finally, free. The silence was alive with their unspoken words. Elias could feel her hand hovering close to his, fragile as glass yet hot with the tremor of restrained fire. Seraphina, demon goddess of 1,000 whispered terrors, was no longer just an untouchable figure of shadow and flame. She was trembling like a woman on the edge of breaking. Her golden eyes flickered with something raw, something Elias had never thought a being like her could show. Fear. When she whispered, her voice was almost human. "You've unbound me, Elias. Do you even know what that means?" He swallowed hard, his heartbeat drumming in his ears. "It means you're free." "No," she said, shaking her head slowly, her dark hair flowing like rivers of night. "It means the chains that held me back no longer exist. The hunger, the power I've buried for centuries. It will rise again. You think you've granted me mercy, but you may have unleashed something the world will not survive." The cave shuddered as though echoing her words. Faint cracks spread across the stone walls, and Elias could feel an invisible heat stirring in the air, oppressive and heavy. For a moment, he caught a glimpse of what she truly was. A cosmic storm wearing flesh, an immortal who could tear mountains from the earth. His chest tightened with the instinct to run, but then he remembered the tears that had fallen from her eyes. He leaned closer, his voice soft but unwavering. "If that's true, then I'll stand with you, even if the world burns." Her gaze snapped to him, furious, desperate, vulnerable all at once. "Why? Why would you throw yourself into the fire for me?" Elias's throat tightened. The words scraped out, bare and raw. "Because someone should have. A long time ago, someone should have looked past your crown of shadows and seen you, and if no one else ever did, then let it be me." For the first time in her endless existence, Serafina felt something greater than hunger, greater than fury. She felt seen. The cracks in the cavern deepened, and a wave of energy rolled through her body. She staggered, clutching her chest as her wings unfurled in a violent rush of power. "It's starting," she gasped. "The seal is broken. I can't hold it back." Her body glowed with violent energy, her aura expanding like wildfire. The very air screamed with pressure, tearing stone from the walls and sending shards flying. Her scream split the air as power surged through her veins, the old, terrible might of her true self returning with a vengeance. Elias shielded his face from the debris, but he didn't move back. He stepped closer instead, his boots crunching on the shaking stone. Through the maelstrom of light and fire, he shouted, "You are not your chains, you are not your hunger, you are more than what they made you." Her golden eyes snapped wide open, filled with anguish. "I'll destroy you." "No!" Elias roared back, his voice cracking but fierce. "You won't, because I trust you, and if no one has ever trusted you before, then take mine." The storm hesitated. For a single heartbeat, the raw, destructive power pulsed without exploding. Serafina trembled, her hands clawing into her chest as if trying to hold the chaos inside. She fell to her knees, wings collapsing around her like a cloak of broken night. Her scream turned to a sob. And then, just like that, the power dimmed. The shaking stopped. The air grew still. Elias rushed forward and caught her as she slumped forward, her forehead pressing weakly against his chest. She was trembling all over, like a warrior who had fought her last battle. "I don't understand," she whispered raggedly. "No mortal has ever endured me unleashed. They all feared me. But you stayed." Elias held her tightly, his voice hoarse but steady. "Maybe that's the real wish I wanted all along. Not to free you, but to remind you that you never had to face it alone." Her breath shuddered against him, and for the first time in centuries, Serafina felt something greater than terror binding her heart. Hope. Slowly she lifted her face to his. The golden fire in her eyes softened into molten warmth, trembling like dawn breaking after endless night. "You foolish, fragile, reckless human," she murmured, her lips curling in a half-broken, half-beautiful smile. "You have no idea what you've done to me." Elias brushed a strand of her midnight hair back, his thumb lingering at her temple. "Then let me spend the rest of my life finding out." Her lips parted in a whisper, and for once she did not hide the tremor in her voice. "Then stay, Elias. Stay with me. Be my anchor when the storm rises again." He pressed his forehead gently to hers. "Always." And in the dark cavern where once a goddess was chained, there was no thunder, no fire, no destruction, only the quiet sound of two hearts beating in defiance of eternity. The demon goddess, feared for ages, had finally been granted her true wish. Not freedom, not power, but someone who dared to love the woman beneath the crown of shadows. And Elias, a mortal broken by life, had found his reason to stand again. Together they trembled, together they endured, and together they began.